Good morning, students. I wanted to give you a little bit of background and that it will help you understand what we're doing, why we're doing what we're doing. I know you've heard me mention before that everything that we do has got to have a purpose, and it does. It has to make sense. This is why brainstorming and researching and doing thumbnails before you actually do your actual work is very important. Planning is everything. Um, there's been a lot of campaigns that for some reason or whatever they don't do well. They completely miss the mark, and a lot of times it's because there's a couple of things going on. A lot of times it could be egos where the company just says, I know what the customer wants. This is what they need. But I can tell you that when I work at a skincare company and I was the director of marketing over there, they were convinced that their product was women over 50 and women that have had cancer. And they had a really crazy amount of products, like 50 something products, which was huge. So basically, it kind of became a hobby of the wife that owned the company. She just wanted a skincare company, and whatever product she wanted, they would just create. And the ingredients in the product were excellent, extremely rich. And so they wanted to get their money's worth. The price point was kind of some high, some low, but sometimes it's just the purpose of why they were having products did not make sense. Some of them. So when I came on board, they hired me to increase the sales. So I used social media at that time to be my focus group because we didn't have a lot of budget either. That's usually also what happens. And as I'm doing this and I'm promoting the product, after my research, yes, their target audience was women over 50, but also there was a pocket of women between like the ages of like 32 to about 45, 46. And so what they like, so you think of it as you get older, especially for um, especially for women. As you get older, you start thinking about skincare in a different way, right? So it is interesting. I learned so much because obviously when you're younger, when you're like in your 30s, you want something to be preventative, right? And when you're in your 40s, you're kind of preventative. And then when you're in your 50s and you get wrinkles, you're like, you're willing to do anything that you can to put on your skin that will avoid those wrinkles. And you may think that you want more natural products also when you're younger, and that could be the case as you grow older, but you also want products that bring change and are effective, right? Because we have different needs. So what was interesting about that focus group is that we had to come in and really you know target the mid 30s to the 40s in one way and the 50s over a different way. And the owners were kind of floored about that. They really had no idea. And so that was really interesting, right? And like there was a product as an example called the décolleté, which you put on your chest and on your neck to avoid wrinkles when you were older. And so they just thought that so many women, over 50 would be buying them, but the reality that product was actually selling more with younger women. So it is really interesting. It's why you have to do the research, and you will hear me every week talking about this. So with that said, let's go to this presentation. So what's a composition? Composition is also referred to a layout, artwork, or design. It means a placement of arrangement of visual elements on a blank page. So again, if you hear the word layout, artwork, and design, and you hear the word composition, they all refer to the same thing. What makes a composition great? Is the way you arrange the elements, your images, your shape, your type, your layout. Everything has to make sense. Your design should tell a story without you needing to explain it. So, and that's an interesting point because you really have to, if you have to over explain it, if somebody just doesn't get it, doesn't see it, that means that it's not working. Sometimes you have to do a little bit of explaining at the at the beginning. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, I see it. That's different. But if, when you're really like overselling it, and yes, when you see it, it's like this, and like, and this is why that works, and everything, and you may be the only person that sees it, but your target audience is not gonna see it like that. This is why focus groups are important, right? Demographics come into place because a lot of times you have to be able that they want to feel like you're talking to them, or they're just gonna move on, like, oh, they're just not talking to me. And visually communicate the message. So this is where typography is a good example, because as an example, if I write a sentence that says the dog is black, okay, what color is the dog? The dog is black. Okay. And I write it in a sentence, but what if I was going to be, like, I wanted to think of it, visualize it. We know what that means. We all know how to read. But think of it, what that means. How would I actually make that into a headline? Maybe you put the dog a little bit larger, and then underneath, maybe you put the word is, and that could be smaller, and then you can take the word black and make it bigger. So you're making a statement, okay? Or you can even do like the dog in one line, or the smaller, dog bigger, the is bigger, and the black smaller. Do you see kind of where I'm going with this? So it is going to be, you can, even though it says the dog is black, the way you're visually displaying it could communicate something entirely differently. So I do want you kind of, to think about this. You want to create an impact and attract viewers' attention. It's like I've said this before. It's like we are what I call master manipulators in some way, in the nicest way possible, of course, because we want our audience to do something, whether it's buy a product, go to a grand opening. So let's say that you are doing, you're promoting an event, let's say it's a spa event, and we know that there's a ton of spa events, right? I know, like, well, why would I want to go? Well, maybe you get in as like a local celebrity in it. Maybe you're getting a local chef that's really good, that they have a following. Maybe you have, the giveaways are awesome, the party favors are awesome, the location is great. It's, the time of the day is also a factor. Are you gonna do it like at Friday at 5 o'clock? Well, maybe Thursday is better because people like to go out on Friday with their friends. And then you're gonna do it at what time? You're gonna do it like 7 to 9? No, probably not, because I'll probably make it like 5 to 7. Keep it more casual. Maybe there's a drink that you can come up with, that you can work with the chef. You see what I'm talking about? Everything has to make sense. Okay, and if you want, what kind of audience do you want to attract? You want a younger audience? You want an older audience? It just kind of really depends. So you have to think about that. So you have to create an impact, or in order for them to say, oh, you know what, this event looks really cool, I'm definitely gonna go. And then you also sum that up with a great photographer, because the people that did not go to the event, they see how great it was, and they're really hoping that you promote, if the next event that you promote, they come to that one. Okay, the principles of design, which you guys are already applying this into your work that you're doing at this moment. So first I'm going to go over some of them, and then I'm going to show you some examples. Balance. The distribution of graphic design elements such as shapes, text boxes, and images of a design evenly throughout a certain layout. Symmetrical. This type of design is formed along a vertical axis and or horizontal axis where the elements are evenly divided into both sides of the layout. So as an example, you have an ad, you have the headline at the very, very top, right, in large. You have an image in the middle. We've all seen this layout. And then we've seen copy, and that's what we call the description, or the, let's say, a subhead. Headline is the most important. Subhead is the one that follows the headline. and then you have your information, which that's the copy. So that's at the bottom. So if you we're gonna split the ad in two, it's one side and the other is very symmetrical. It works. Um, Asymmetrical is when it employs scale, contrast, and color to even out the flow of the layout. So the layout where the elements are not is not exactly the same, but however, you use like your positive and your negative space. You make elements larger. Okay, you maybe put in a pop of color to balance to offset that they're not symmetrical, but they work. The elements work. Alignment. It creates a visual connection between elements such as images, shapes, and blocks of text. So even though we don't have a grid, okay, when we're working, there are imaginary lines of grid. Okay, so if you look at a magazine layout as an example, and you see a picture and you see three columns of text, if you look at that, you don't see the lines, but you can visually imagine that they all sit on they begin at an imaginary line, and there's the exact same space between each one of those paragraphs. That's why you have to rearrange and use your imaginary grid to place the elements. And I this will make more sense. I will make a video about that, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Hierarchy. It gives extra weight and importance to a certain elements of design over others. So you always have to have like, it's pretty much like a focal point. You always have to have something of importance, right? If you don't give something, importance, then it it's very hard to follow. Think about how you want the people to look at an ad. You want them to read the headline, you want them to see the picture, and you want them to read the subhead. Or you want them to read the headline, the subhead, the picture, and then the copy. Now, when all elements are the same size, the viewer is not going to read or follow that direction in that way at all. So what's going to happen is they're going to be very confused, or they're like, I just don't get it, and they're just going to move on. So that's not an effective ad. You need to think about what needs to be emphasized, what elements, whether it is a picture, a drawing, or information or a headline. So hierarchy, highlighting the title using large and bold fonts. Now don't overdo it. Some people bold everything. You also don't want to do that. It's kind of like I have a client who just he's so funny. He he likes to bold and underline everything, and he when he tries to give me direction, he goes, "You need to underline that, bold that." Well, he's right because he's trying to create emphasis. But what happens the way he's approaching it, he wants to bold everything and underline everything, and so then you don't have a sense of importance again. Implement detail and colorful visuals. That also helps you with the hierarchy. Contrast. Contrast is formed when design elements are placed in a position of a layout. For example, dark versus light, thick versus thin, contemporary versus traditional, large versus small. So in your line project that you guys did, a lot of you guys did that, where you actually took the line and make some lines thicker. Instead of you doing a bunch of lines the same width, it's obviously that works because it's part of the assignment. But however, how would you make that more interesting? If you make some of the lines thicker and thinner, and then maybe you look like every 5 lines you make one of them really big, and then the other ones on the side a little bit not as thick as the others, so you kind of give it movement. So that's one way of doing it. Dark versus light, I love playing with, which is also positive and negative space. I love playing with the balance of that. I have had clients in the past who, if there's white space, they want to fill it up. They want to make things larger. They want to drop it in there. They just want to fill it up because they're feeling that they're missing an opportunity for a message. But So you have to, as a designer, you have to help them through it and explain to them why it becomes clutter, and clutter is not a good idea. So you're gonna have to think about that, okay? And sometimes I will give you advice right now. I mean, at the beginning when I started doing this, the industry, I would take any client in any, a, literally any industry, and they would hire me because they like my portfolio. But then you get those that created the logo in Word, and the logo is like a sun and a moon and a mountain and all this other stuff, and you know it's not working, and they just love it, and they just want you to recreate it as, let's say, they just want you to create it in Illustrator so they can have a vector file. Well, great, you can do that, but then that's not, you're not gonna put that in your portfolio. You just want to do, you're just doing that to get paid. Okay. Then there's the ones that they just like, you just can't, for some reason you just, as much as you try, you can't get them to change their mind about the way the layout's working. So at that time, again, you pick and choose your battles. At that time, what you do, you just let it go, finish the work, of course, but do it exactly as they say. And more than likely, you will never work with them again because they're not gonna get the feedback that they were expecting, but they're never gonna think that it was them. They're gonna think it was you. So again, you just get paid for that. So there's gonna be, I recommend that you do all kinds of different jobs. You know, it's like I was, um, when I was trying to go from a working in corporation to an ad agency, I went to a small ad agency in Richardson, and they were doing the air ducts. So pretty much what the AC, the vents that come out in your house, but these were industrial. Imagine how boring that was. But you know what? It was awesome. It was awesome that was one of the clients that paid the bills at the agency, but also I we would put it into catalogs, and so your attention to detail and your practice with that was superb because you had to leave all like headlines the same way. You had to get paragraphs at different, at the same size. You had to have the folios, which are page numbers, in a certain place. Everything had to line up. So it was a lot of hours, but it helped me really with my attention to detail. Let's see, rhythm. Rhythm brings things together. I have a typo in there. Rhythm brings things together. Rhythm brings together different elements to create a more organized and consistent look. Fluid. This adds a significant amount of variation to the design, keeping the flow in a single direction. Progressive. Progressive rhythm is based on a clear sequence which controls the visual movement of the audience between the different elements. So you just have to, and this is when we talk about flow. When you look at something and it's like, oh, it flows beautifully. As an example, let's say that you're doing a brochure, and even a brochure has, you have to. I mean, I'm telling you everything you have to think through. How would you like the brochure to fold? Okay, how much information do we have? Well, we're gonna end up with information that's gonna cover like 8 panels, as an example, right? So with a brochure, let's say, oh, okay, do I want it open like a book? Do I want it doing like an accordion opening? So let's say you have like an accordion design, and you're looking at it, and you open it up, and you're like, oh, somebody goes, oh, this flows really nicely. That's what rhythm is. Proximity. Proximity helps decluttering the overall design by creating relationship between related elements. Color and space. Choosing the right color can help define the tone of the design. Yes. So, as an example, and I give this example a lot because and every time I give you an example, these are all industries that I've actually done work with. But a florist, I had a lady that was opening her own florist, and she heard about me, and I created a logo for her. Well, you're not gonna use, let's say, like, I don't know, well, in a florist, pretty much anything can go, but you're not gonna use like brown. Like if you think of the color brown on on a logo for a florist, I mean, you think of like dead flowers, right? So think about that. If you do a job for a doctor's office, you're not gonna use the color red. So as cool as awesome as red is, but you also have to do you so you really have to think about it. You have to interview the client. You have to ask them questions about what colors they're thinking, why. And she said my favorite color is yellow. Yellow is really hard to work with because yellow is there's different hues of yellow. And so if you put a bright yellow onto a white piece of paper, it's gonna be very hard to see. So I kind of pushed her a little bit, so we went a little bit more yellow orange, and that helped quite a bit. So and we did yellow and pink and that kind of thing. So it's it makes it soft. She really wanted to focus in weddings, and so there was a lot of bridal. She do arrangements and all that stuff, but her focus was mainly big events. Okay, so here's an example of alignment and repetition. So alignment is like perfectly center in the middle of this page. You see the space between here and here is the same, and also the space between top and bottom. Repetition, it just means continuity. You see it one same amount of elements here, same amount of elements here. You also can see there's contrast in here between the black and the white. Here's another example of contrast. That's also an example of contrast. Here's hierarchy, or like giving different emphasis to different elements, kind of like what you're doing in the what you did in the line assignment. Balance and symmetry. Is if you have all these elements, how would you position them in a way that they're balanced and they have symmetry? Balance and tension. So this is showing this element is the same shape as this, but the size is it just seems like you can get so many different ideas by looking at this, because you can see like, oh, okay, well, this is the sun, this is the earth, or this little guy is running around that big one. But it really makes it interesting because the big one is brought all the way to the edge, and then the little one, you can see all of it. And if you would have had like one element here like this and one element here like this, it would be of the little one the same size, you would not have this effect. So you really have to think about that. So, and here's an example of alignment, right? So if you put text on a paper, like you see the line, this would be your guideline that you would do in any of the Adobe applications. But obviously you're there just to line up your elements. But obviously that's gonna go away, so you can see that everything lines up. You can see here in these pages how things are lining up. The text comes all the way to the edge. It's a rectangle photo. It goes from side to side. They have pictures. It looks like recipes. They have pictures of this elements in here, and it goes through this throughout the entire book. But all the pictures are the same size. Um, repetition. So you've seen this. You've seen this in beers. What is that? We'll have to pull up an example of a couple of even just Texas beers that they have a variety of different beer selections, however, within one company. But everything looks like it belongs together, right? But they're also, when you have put all together, you can see the repetition. Let's see here. Contrast. I love playing with typography and big and large and bold. Not every font, by the way, will give you this kind of effect. You really have to kind of think about that. Look at the contrast in this poster. Almost looks like a stamp. It's a nice balance, right? The white is on the edge. There's just enough information on the type that you can read what it is, but then you see the image in here. Whoops. Okay, hierarchy. Again, giving emphasis to different elements. Something like this is almost borderline busy. You have a lot of information, so you really have to think about how you are going to organize this so it won't look clutter. So they did a good job here. So they have the headline. They've made it large and bold, as you can see. Okay, and then they have the image in here. Looks like some kind of exhibit. A little information about it. Type here, and then the information hours and all that stuff in here. So they made something work. Look at this right here. I'm in love with this. I just again, it's a good example of positive and negative space. The numbers are one type, and you can see these are different type, but you have the sans serif, which is larger all caps. Then you have, I can't see here, you guys, but I think it's smaller all caps, or it could be lower and uppercase, and then they have a lighter font right here. So, but you can see what the emphasis is. So this is it gives you the steps. So if you were doing, go back to the example of the skincare. If you were creating a system on what products you need to use. I mean, some of you guys may be really young, but if you're already using skincare, you can think of it. Oh, but you go to the store and they're like, oh yeah, this is a great product, and buy this and buy that and buy this and buy that, and you're all excited, and you go home. But then you're like, oh, was I supposed to put on that first? Was I supposed to put on that second? And you just want somebody to literally tell me. It's like 1, 2, 3. Whether you give me a chart, whether you give me a little list, something that I need to know. Where this first, where this second, where this third. This is a good example of that. Balance and symmetry. Again, this is a good balance of balance and symmetry. And this is also, you can see, if you were going to split this circle in half, it would be the same on both sides. Balance and tension. Look at this, the large type, but little, smaller images. The treatments, if you notice that font is all the same. The size of the font varies, but where it starts from the edge on top and bottom and side to where the place is, they have flexibility of space. This is what is called flush left, by the way, because you have that imaginary line here, and the text sits on the left side, and the right is just how it lays. It doesn't really matter, but you can see these are consistent, and they look similar. Design theories. Okay, the rules of thirds. So a lot of times, to some of you, it may become very easy of where to place elements. If you've taken an art class, if you're an illustrator, a drawing class, any of those, because they also apply the principles of design, you probably have an easier time identifying those without actually splitting the page. You can see it visually in your head when you look at a piece of paper where you're going to place things. Some of you might actually need a little bit of help. And by the way, if you haven't taken an art class, I would recommend that you do. It will just make you that much more stronger as a designer, an animator, or whatever it is that you're doing in the creative field. So the rule of thirds can be applied to any subject to improve the composition and balance of your images. It is one of the most useful composition techniques, acting as a guideline that helps creatives determine where to place an object or asset. This theory is about the effective method of dividing your canvas artwork into thirds, both horizontally and vertically, resulting in 4 intersection points. These are the ideal spots for placing focal points with your design. Top left is the most looked at by your viewers. So here's an example. You split it this way, then you turn it vertically and split it this way. And then you take in, okay, so this is a little smaller. This is about 6% bigger. This is 5% bigger, and then this is more more bigger. Laugh with me. It's bigger than obviously this one, so you can see with your eye immediately travels to this. I don't know about you guys, but my eye goes here. Then it could go here, but it could kind of also go here. But I notice it travels like this and like this. So this is how you want the viewer to see it. So when you have an image in here, so you read the great outdoors, then you go to the image, then you come here. The great outdoors image, and it says can bear the cold, cuddle up. So this is why it's important. This is the purpose of it. If you wouldn't actually think of where to put the elements, then this wouldn't make sense. It would look cluttered and disorganized. The golden ratio. The golden ratio is a standard mathematical ratio found in nature to create natural looking compositions in your design work. Sometimes it is referred to as divine proportions, a series of interlocked golden rectangles established by the shape of a golden spiral. So here it gives you the idea. So you see the spiral in here, right? And some of this, obviously, these are obvious right here. But now come in here, come to the bottom right, and what you see here, obviously, you see the man on a cliff, and your eye drives you here. Now, look at what happens if you need to know where to crop it, because when you bring images, you're not a lot of times you're not going to use them just as they are. You're going to find a place to crop them to make it more interesting. So look where this was cropped. They zoom in and they were closer, and then now they did the golden ratio, and see what that looks. You can still see there's a man on a cliff, and the cliff is much larger. But here we know that he's standing on the edge of the cliff. We already know that. However, and we know the cliff, just by what we know about our Earth, is bigger than the guy. We know that. But we want to make it obvious, okay? So this is why this was zoomed into. Because obviously you see this gigantic cliff and this little guy standing at the top of it. And this makes more sense than actually doing this. I hope you guys enjoy it, and let me know if you have any questions, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye.